The tyranny of now, nostalgia, form, identity, and the never-ending arrival of the new world. Romanticism has no place in the modern world, for the modern world has no place in romanticism. To use an arguably loaded turn of phrase, romanticism has concerned itself, from conception, both aesthetically and conceptually, with the revolt against the modern world, quarreling with empiricism and rejecting the advancements of the Enlightenment. Once nominally associated with humanitarianism and even liberal revolution, Romanticism, even in the past, was an invention of intellectuals among the English gentry, a coping mechanism of sorts devised to make radical change to the world order more bearable. During the fledgling years of the Industrial Revolution, all around them, people lost faith in God, moved away from their homes and families in the country to pursue work and wealth in the teeming cities, and slowly come to live their lives in ways practically foreign to the Romantics. Over these years, as the revolutions they once cheered on continued with no end in sight, the Romantics grew dissatisfied, no longer stamping their feet and racing to write in support of those manning the barricades. For the Romantics realized the revolutionaries weren't fighting to stop the rise of the cities and the dirty, busy, metropolitan way of life. In fact, the opposite was true. The revolutionaries were struggling to save the cities, as to make life in them safer, grander, and more busy than ever before, improving them so the largest amount of people might be able to live within their bounds and work safely and prosper. This revelation alone, occurring sometime between the French Revolution and the revolutions of 1848, caused Romanticism to pack up and hike from the camp of progress to the camp of reaction. The revolutions had been no good all along, distancing people everywhere from traditional values and modes of living. But what had caused them? What idea? And when? The answer many attached to Romanticism settled on was the Enlightenment, the most earth-shattering intellectual moment in European history up until that point, the very time when now first occurred, with the legendary, not-so-forgotten age of then materializing concurrently. Naturally, now was the problem, an area virtually devoid of greatness, passion, nearly everything good and recognizable. The people of now were sluggish and uninspired, brutes too selfish to simply know to bow down to nature and the sublime, expecting good things to come to them for simply existing. The great folk of then, however, were a different sort. While the people of now lived out servile, rat-like existences in dank and dirty cities of brick and mortar, the people of then hunted for their own food, ranged far and wide across the trackless wilds, worked their land and defended it in turn, and built grand monuments to their gods and ancestors. The people of now were led by dottery bureaucrats and wheeler dealers. The folk of then were led by convinced, solitary men who respected and paid homage to nature's majesty. This attitude of exalting anything and everything natural, awe-inspiring, and traditional, and longing for revival of past glories, came to govern Romanticism, coinciding with the rise of modern nationalism. Ozymandias by Percy B. Shelley, and the works of Kipling in the British Empire, the operas of Wagner in Germany, the cultural aesthetic of Manifest Destiny in the U.S., all movements and works based on the ideals detailed above, slowly and subtly, but surely nonetheless, working to pull Romanticism onto a dark, reactionary path going into the 20th century, a path adverse to egalitarianism, adverse to social progress, and chiefly adverse to democratic, collective living. In its desire to preserve and promote greatness and the purity of then, National Romanticism has since forgotten poetry, growing to concern itself with detached rhetoric and imitation, forced to remain stuck in now. Beset by the present, the National Romantics flock at the feet of those in society who closest resemble the protagonists of their writings and the historical figures they're inspired by. Strongmen and like-minded reactionary intellectuals, people who preach order, tradition, and the wisdom of past ages, people who claim to be in touch with natural order and the real world, yet who reject climate science and make no effort to understand, empathize with, and otherwise engage with diverse society at large. National Romantics can criticize and rail against the current state of civilization all they want, truly knowing, deep down, it will never, ever allow them to turn back time. Progress triumphs, always, and the world has never not been changing, growing slowly unrecognizable to those who live in it. The children of fear are outclassed and outnumbered in now, and they simply know it. See, it's the secret fate of all things that frightens the National Romantics the most. The degradation and ultimate annihilation of their states, their special God-blessed places, their very lives at the hands of that ravenous old world-eater called time. Yet all history is modern history. Then was never just then. It has always been now. And Romanticism isn't revolting against it. Romanticism attempts to do away with the true vulgarity of being, of waking up as a hairless ape and having to breathe, work, sweat, and weep in the shadow of mountains.